Good morning, good morning. Can everyone hear me well? Yes, we're good to go? I can always tell like who's involved with some sort of research or school or something like that because they feel comfortable in these environments and they sit close. And everyone else, you can tell who didn't pay attention in school and they fan to the back of the classroom. But great to see everyone this morning. Welcome to another ASGA Fisheries Science Symposium. This might confuse you, but this is our 4th science symposium ever. It is our 3rd one on Cape Cod. We can't say annual because there was a gap in between. There's 3 in our past 4 years. This is our 2nd at MBL, and we also hosted our first ever in Louisiana this past year as well. So 3rd by annual with an asterisk, 4th ever. Super excited to be back here. MBL is such a fantastic place with all the research and everything that's going on. What a better home. And on Cape Cod before the Cheeky Schoolie tournament with everyone around. As everything's warming up here, this is just getting into the perfect time to be on Cape Cod, and I can say that growing up here. So fantastic to be back. When Tony and I were talking earlier, we're like, man, let's get this thing going, getting ourselves hyped up for the event. And I looked at him and said, you know, I'm not really worried because our events now at this point, they kind of feel like family reunions. We see a lot of the same faces who attend year after year, who are involved in processes from research to management to the brands we work with on the industry side. So fantastic homegrown environment here and excited to have everyone back. Going to kick things off really, really quickly with a little video to set, are we going to set some mood lighting? Ooh, I don't know if I like, that's definitely not the mood lighting I was going for. But
can everyone locate my bald spot now?
Yeah,
my
exactly.
multiple UFO landing
Going
site.
to kick things off with a quick video. It's only like 60 seconds just to set the vibe for who ASGA is, what we're up to, and then we'll go from there.
Better business, conservation. It's more than tagline. It's a guiding light for a fulfilling lifestyle. It's the reason we're out the door before sunrise. The reason to take the road less travel. The motivation to quit your day job and do what you love. Love sharing the experience of getting both so dearly. Hearing up others in their own way. We're trading fish tails for the round feeding. The truth is, all our lives made better for fishing more. Not in one generation, take over, reduce the thought. At the helm, behind the fights, on the docks, or in the shop. That's why ASGA exists, to educate, amplify, to empower, to give a voice to the voiceless, the resources we rely on. The American Saltwater Guides Association. Better business, through conservation.
Ooh. One time is good enough. Cool. So my name, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Cody Rubner. I run the branding communications for ASGA. We're going to introduce Tony here in a second, but was thankful to work with Camden Spear out of Maine, who's a young upcoming videographer to help make our brand campaign. That was the first chapter, and we talked about this being a family reunion. You'll see a lot of familiar faces and voices, and there's a little bit of foreshadowing to a couple other things we're going to talk about later today. But without further ado, the first talker, we have a really good lineup of people that are far smarter about fisheries than Tony and myself, and we're going to get to them in a second. We're going to start off with just a brief intro for the people who are maybe new to ASGA, what we're up to, what we stand for, who we are, and then from there we're going to give you some updates on research, policy campaigns that we have going on, and some events and some local community campaigns that we're super excited about or just recently happened. So why don't I introduce Tony to talk for a couple minutes about ASGA, who we are, and then we're going to get into, I think in order, we're going to do quick updates on stripers, albies, redfish, and jack crevalle all in a row, and then we'll go from there. So pretty good lineup.
Thank you, Cody. I'm Tony Friedrich. I'm the president and policy director for y'all who don't know me. And yeah, I look around the room, and it's pretty inspiring for us, like the folks who are in the trenches doing this every day, because I just see supporter after supporter after supporter, people who are brand representatives for big brands or own their own business and chose to support us while they're struggling with, everything that's going on in this world. So it's, just a very deep appreciation that I have for all of you, because we wouldn't exist without you. And I know that sounds like goofy and kitschy, but it's pretty heartfelt when we mean it. Thank you for believing in us. So, you look at this slide and you see science, education, and advocacy. And I think I was on the phone with Cody and Peter a couple of years ago, and we were, you try to read the tea leaves and look at what the future holds for fisheries, where the gaps are, what people really are inspired to get behind. And we don't just want to be one of those organizations that's like, hey, come to our banquet. And yeah, that's great. I'm sorry, my wife's taking the dogs for a walk in Maryland right now, so my Ring camera's going off every couple of seconds. I apologize. Nobody has to look at their phone. It's just my German Shepherd running in circles around the yard right now. So, we got to talking, and we were all kind of like, well, what are we about? Like, what do we believe in? And it's science, education, and advocacy, which just so happens to spell C. That was not intended, just luck of the draw. So it's really hard to count fish. It's really hard to understand what's in the water. And the people who do it every day and have degrees in science need help. They need help with funding. They need help with communications. No offense. It's a certain personality that does science. I'm looking at one right now who's laughing, so I know I'm not in trouble. Where's Greg? Greg's laughing too, thank God. So yeah, you're really great at the science that you do, but usually they're not great at communication, and they're constrained by where they work and allowed to what they can say, and we're not. So we're kind of a megaphone for that science that we can collaborate on, and we bring all the rank and file guides and anglers along with us, and you're educated as we do the science. And then you have a greater understanding, and you become the best advocates in the world. And you can see that with what we've done over stripers in the last 5 years. Now look, stripers aren't doing great. I'm not going to put that on my resume that I saved stripers, but the community for conservation is second to none. And that was kind of our litmus test to see if this worked, and it did. So we're recreating it for multiple species, as you're going to see in a second, around the country. So y'all were the canaries in the coal mine. Let's raise the money for science. People believe in that. They really do. Anglers care. They want to get involved in conservation. We'll use great people like Cody. I don't know how lucky I am that he came along, but I don't think there's anyone better in communications in this whole world that we live in than Cody, and he's able to take all the gobbledygook and put it out there so y'all can understand it, and then you believe in us, and and then you go to these meetings and you know what the hell you're talking about. Because if y'all have attended these meetings, that is the minority. Usually you hear a lot of comments that are just kind of make you scratch your head, and our advocates are the most professional in the business. They know the issues, they're polite, they're respectful, they come in, they state their case, and they go home. And you do that consistently, and you show up, and we've made a difference, and you all have made a difference. You should be very proud of that. Things aren't perfect, but they'd be a hell of a lot worse if it wasn't for all of y'all. So we'll go to the next slide, but thank y'all all for spending your Friday with us, because this is all part of the process to help make sure that our kids and grandkids can enjoy the outdoors like we did, because they deserve it. So, oh boy, stripers. I don't even know what to say. Y'all have been having good seasons. I'm not disputing that. You're going out, you're catching fish, and I'm happy for you. I am not. I live on the eastern shore of Maryland, in between two of the most prolific spawning rivers in the Chesapeake Bay. One of them is so prolific that called the Chop Tank. If the Chop Tank has a good spawn, it can carry the entire Young of the Year index. That's how prolific it is. If you had to pray for one river to have a good spawn, it would be the tank. So, and I can look out of my marina and see the mouth of the Chop Tank. I'm very familiar with that river. I've lived in my house for almost 20 years. They're not spawning well. We're not seeing small fish. I was talking to a couple of guides. I was talking to Parker and Chris. On an average year, we catch thousands of stripers. It's 5 minutes, like from the time that I walk out of my house till the time that I'm making my first cast. And I caught 6 last year. Now, I did fish for other stuff, but it's as bad as I've ever seen it. So anyone who's saying that we're not doing the Young of the Year surveys in the right place, or it's Bigfoot or UFOs, or they're not spawning well. And to me, it doesn't really matter why they're not spawning well. They're not spawning well. And we have a couple of levers to pull, and we have to pull them. So I want to explain something that's a little bit of it's misunderstood. And it's abundance versus spawning stock biomass, the SSB. So you really have to read the fine print when you're doing any work on policy or science with striped bass stocks. So the spawning stock biomass is based off weight. So to define what the spawning stock biomass is that is fecund females. It's females of sexual age. And it's based off of weight. So we have a couple of good year classes out there. We have the 2011s, the ones that made it out of the bay before we slaughtered them all, the 15s and the 18s. So as those fish mature and they get bigger, it gives you this false sense of like, hey, things are getting better. But that has nothing to do with abundance. And we have 6 vacant year classes. And when I mean vacant, I mean vacant. So you have to start really thinking about, okay, if we hit this target number in 2029 with the 10-year rebuilding time plan, great, we did something, and that's fantastic. And a lot of that is due to Mike Armstrong, who we gave the Conservationist of the Year award, and his emergency action, mass DMF, and they should be applauded. And it wasn't any small thing that we did, but there's a vast difference between abundance and spawning stock biomass. And I'll just say one other thing. And I feel like I'm on pretty solid ground saying this. You know, everyone always says there's no stock recruitment relationship with striped bass, meaning that if the conditions are perfect, very few fish can lead to a lot of little fish. And that's happened in the past, and that's what brought us out of the moratorium. But in my educated opinion, that is a pile of shit. Because now I'm sorry, if that was too scientific, I think it's incorrect. So you cannot tell me that more fish in the water is not better for a spawn. And if anyone wants to come up and debate me, I'll pull a chair up right here and we can just go toe to toe on it. You are setting yourself up to where you have to have perfect conditions with the number of fish that we have. The other issue with not having a good stratified age structure is striped bass spawn in 4 waves. The biggest ones spawn first. They show up in my neck of the woods probably the 2nd or 3rd week in February, is when we can start getting really big fish, the 50-pound fish, and they're pretty much gone. And that we've looked at acoustic telemetry studies. The big fish are in and out of the bay super fast. They get the job done. The females are gone. And there's 4 waves, and each wave gets progressively smaller. So that's why you need a good stratified age structure. You need a good number of big fish and a whole lot of little fish. Well, if you don't have that good stratified age structure, those 4 spawning waves may be 2.5 spawning waves. So then you are really lessening your chances for those perfect conditions. So it's kind of like you're playing 5-card stud with 3 cards. You're not going to win a lot of hands at that poker game. And that's kind of where we are right now. There's all sorts of other things going on in the bay, but we can't pull those levers. You know, I've been friends with Marty Gary for 30 years. I taught his boy how to fly fish. His first casting lesson was with Lefty Cray at my event. I've known Marty a long time. He's running around saying there's a problem with larval whatever and the plankton and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, when did you do a seine study on that? Well, we haven't done a seine study in 25 years. And I'm like, well, shut up then, because it doesn't matter, right? We have levers that we can pull. That is a season, a size, and a creel limit. That's all we can do, right? That's all we can do with stripers. And like I said, I'm super happy that y'all are having a good season. I'm glad that y'all are seeing the 11s, the 15s, and the 18s. I'm glad your businesses are doing okay. You don't want to be us in the bay, and it's going to happen soon. So we have to keep a real keen eye on what's going to happen after we rebuild in 2029. If there is a 7th bad spawn, that young of the year number will come out into September, early October. It is our opinion that there is no other recourse but a moratorium. If this was ducks, I'm a pretty avid duck hunter. If they had 2 bad fledges, the duck hunters would be up in arms. One duck limit. No duck hunting next year. Do everything you can. Stop the insanity. You look at chronic wasting disease in deer, where it's pretty bad in areas that I grew up in. The deer hunters are up in arms. Conservation, conservation, conservation. I know of no other species on this earth that could have 7 failed recruitment spawns in a row, and people aren't just mashing the panic button, because it's real and it's going to happen. So you want to go to the next slide. If anyone has any questions on stripers, the most recent meeting, Addendum 3 to Amendment 7, oh my gosh. Y'all, this action wasn't meant to conserve fish. It was put forth to delay the process, so certain people could have the last shot at the 2018s because they're coming into the slot. And it worked, and they won, and we lost. And Lou isn't here, but Lou developed the Got One app, and we had validated data that Mass DMF used for their catch and release mortality study that had exact locations, images of the fish, every environmental condition, that exact moment the fish was caught, with 12,000 stripers recorded in the last 2 years. We begged ASMFC to move the slot down because there's not a lot of small fish, and we're looking at an 17% increase in harvest this year because those 18s are entering the slot. We didn't want that to happen. We said move the slot down a couple of inches, and they said, no, there's little fish, there's more of them. And we were like, no, there's not. And we made this beautiful chart that showed all the sizes of the fish that our anglers had caught over the last 2 years. And ASMFC said, we can't use that data. And then 2 months later, I was on a technical committee call with ASMFC, and they said, oh man, we kind of screwed up. We based all the data on these 2-year classes of small fish off one intercept. So we're 100% support science. I don't support abject stupidity. And you base a decision off one intercept is me walking up to John and saying, how'd you do today, John? Did you catch some fish? How many did you catch? How many did you keep? How many did you throw back? Thank you, have a good day. And jotting it down on a piece of paper. Versus 12,000 validated fish that were caught over 2 years from North Carolina to Maine. That's pretty disheartening. So, but you can't worry about the past, you have to look at the future. So we're in the spot that we're in. And we're going to keep recording the fish, and hopefully they'll incorporate that into the benchmark stock assessment that's going to come out in 2027. That's going to be our big look at stripers and what the future looks like. We got to hold on tight to that science, and we got to advocate for the future of the fish. So if there's any questions on stripers, I can kind of take just a super quick pause. I know everyone cares about it. This Addendum 3 isn't going to do a lot to conserve fish. I can get into the weeds on that, but it might take a while. But if anyone has any questions before we move on to the next species, I'd be happy to answer them, because this is all I've done. I sent somebody a picture. I got a memory come up on social media where I had a coffee cup and a little thing of Advil, little package of Advil, and it said getting ready for the ASMFC meeting, and it was from 2013. So it's like, some of these young kids are like, I was 8, like. You feel like Groundhog Day after a little bit. Nick?
I'm just curious, I know you said you don't really care why that they're not spawning that river by you, but what's your 2 cents? Any idea why?
They've thrown every possible, I've heard everything from the multi-decadal oscillation theory to, it's warming, the water's dirty, it's blue catfish, it's snakeheads, it's, Bigfoot, UFOs, cormorants. Here's the deal, right? I don't think we're in a position where we have to have the absolute perfect conditions, because I don't think we have a good enough stratified age structure. I don't think we have a lot of big fish left. There's a problem. I mean, there is a problem with the numbers of fish, and I think we are backed into the corner. And it's not as simple as like there has to be a cold winter with snow, okay? Because my river, I mean, I live on a coastal plain. I can see like 17 and a half miles. There is no hill. I'm the highest house in my neighborhood, and I have a 3-foot bump in my property. So like that's the curvature of the earth, like 17 and a half miles. It is flat as a pancake. There are no mountains. You know, and that you hear a lot like, oh, it's got to snow in Pennsylvania and you have to have the runoff. And you're like, yeah, that's the other side of the bay. Like, that doesn't affect us. So we got the Chester, the Chop Tank, the Nanticoke. You know, those are prime rivers that are in a marsh. I think the blue catfish are taking a toll on them, just like any other invasive species. Like, they spike and then kind of level off. We've seen the snakeheads level off. Snakeheads are not taking a toll. They can breathe air, and they're like way back in the marsh. And if you're a frog or a mud minnow, you got problems if a snakehead's around. But like, they don't really. I've cut a lot of snakeheads open. I've never seen a little striper in one. I saw a mole in one. I don't know how the hell it got the mole, but you know, that's a story for another time. What I think it is, our quota in Maryland for the commercial fishery, and we're not anti-commercial, we kill 80% of the fish in numbers of fish, not the pounds. Our quota is 2 million pounds. We have winter gill netting, summer hook and line, summer pound net, haul seines. We have a 2 million pound quota. People complain about Massachusetts. Y'all have a 700,000 pound quota. So think about that, and we can't keep a striper over 36 inches. And we haven't taken a reduction in that quota since all this has been going on. And we haven't had a good spawn. So you're pounding fish with that same quota. Recreational effort and harvest is down over 50% because people just are not fishing in Maryland anymore. There's no point. So we are not treating the resource correctly, and I think that's the problem. If it's our fault. It's not blue catfish. So these fish have lived through a lot over the course of time. A lot of changes, a lot of things have happened. And you know, if you had to ask why are they having this problem now, I think it's us. And we can fix that. So any other questions on stripers? Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir.
So, I mean, I think there's different levels of concern and care about stripers, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a sliver at the top of people, like the people in this room, that really passionate and care a lot.
Yep.
There's probably bottom of the scale, there's a bunch of people that don't care at all.
New Jersey, yeah.
The majority of people are in that middle, but they generally care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, and don't know how they can do something important. You guys have done an amazing job at educating a lot of people on the concerns, the science, the policies. But I think one effort that is worthwhile thinking about is, you know, how do we get deeper into the tackle shops and into the touching the people that are the kind of people that are going to vote, right Congress people, you know, or take individual actions to be more conservation minded. I think that's an important resource.
Yeah, I'm not even I'll talk policy. I'm a fool if I don't give the microphone to this guy. Well, if that's your question.
My response was going to be yes, and also what you just said is my stress day to day. So thank you for the reminder. But no, I think that's a really good point. And I think, like, you know, you talked about that middle group. We're going to talk about one or two things. We'll get to them a little bit later. He might be here, but like, for example, one of the things we'll talk about that I guess I'll announce now, but so Oxbow Brewing is a beer out of Maine, and they've decided in their collaboration with Rising Tide, another brewery, they've started a beer called Striper Season, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but it's hilarious. It says like, does good
is beer.
You know, so
it's the greatest marketing campaign in the history of humanity.
Yeah. So
like,
I
just, it's, and
Tony
it has
already
the
bought a case,
story.
but,
It explains striped bass are in trouble. When you actually get the can, you
Like
turn
the
it
back of the
around and
can.
it tells the story. We're no stone unturned.
So
Parker.
stuff like that, and like when I look at a project like that, that touches the people that are gonna buy it because they like striper fishing and just see the can on the rack and go, I love stripers and I like beer, right? So, but that person might not know that there's anything going on. And so those are the type of things that we're always trying to get creative with how we can reach people, because we don't want to operate in an echo chamber, because it doesn't efficiently grow the army of people who should care about the resource. So if I just say in this room, we all say, hey, advocate for stripers, and this 60 people says, yeah, that's just those 60 people. But the things that you talked about, and we'll talk about a couple different events and stuff throughout this, but that is the major thing and is the core of people who care. And one of the things that I also like to judge the impact of the advocacy on is the numbers, but also I think Tony maybe brought it up earlier, but like you listen to a management call nowadays and the type of people who, own a insert business X and it's related to fishing, or they just fish on the side on their own. But the type of stuff that they're talking about on a management meeting now, that someone who's, got a wife and kids and a full-time job and they fish every Saturday that the weather's good, 20, 30 times a year, maybe if they can, those people are referencing spawning stock biomass and all these different cycles. So
who knew what conservation equivalency was 4 years ago?
Like,
right, and everyone in the room's kind of like, death to conservation equivalency,
it's like you, from my perspective at least, you look at those two levers and it's like, if I could flood 10,000 people into the next striped bass management meeting with the click of a button, right? Also, how would they operate and what would they have for a tool chest to participate too? So it's like trying to get people into the funnel and also make sure that they're gaining some resources and some ability to interact as well. But it's a long answer. I'm giving some perspective on it, but I think that's the biggest challenge, right? For a lot of people, we meet some people that's like, yeah, it might be bad right now, but I fish 5 times a year. I'm busy as hell. And like, who am I to care? Or how?
NOAA did a survey several years ago asking where people get most of their fisheries information from, and I may be wrong a little bit, but it was like 70 to 80% get it from the tackle shop. Mm-hmm. So if you go to our chairman's tackle shop, Mr. Peter Jenkins at Saltwater Edge, where you should all buy your hoagie lures from. See, I got both of them in there.
Yeah. Keep going down the line.
Yeah, and then you should go to, bone fishing at Soulfly Lodge and get all your econ information from Ben. So, that made me want to jump off the Bay Bridge when I read that, because, just the average person in a tackle shop being like, it's never been better. Stripers, they're eating all the crabs.
That sounds like a very specific person.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me snap out of that for a second. But yeah, that just goes to show you the hill that we have to climb.
And on that topic, on the retail network, you're so correct. And I think there's a fear. One of the major points that affects that growth of conservation in the retail network is a fear of saying things are bad. It happens on the guide side too. Well, if things are bad, maybe people will be less incentivized to come in. But there's actually a lot of research that's been done. When I used to work at Costa Sunglasses back in the day, we did a lot of conservation work around sustainability and plastic, kicking plastic. And there's been research done that I want to say under 40 now. I could be slightly off on the age, but considerations of impact. If there's 3 brands on a shelf and they all make a can of something and it all could be the same, from my buyer's perspective, it's like a vast majority, 75, 80% of people care more about the story behind a brand and conservation. So I think you're seeing an evolution in that. And with that evolution, you'll see more room and comfort for retailers to be like, oh, I'm actually talking about conservation. And now the community is actually more inspired that I care about what they care about. So they're choosing to give me their business over. So if you look at it from that perspective, do we want to race to the bottom where it's like who can sell the last thing or catch the last fish before they're gone, or who can try to do the most good and inspire the most stewardship and do so, compete, whoever does the most good for the resource that we all share and care about, that's who gets the crown and the most business, because retailers, whether it's lure company, tackle shop, whatever, we're all in competition, the same way guides are to a certain
Parker,
extent.
to piggyback on that, so you have Saltwater Edge, Hoagie, Ben, who has a PhD in natural resources economics, he's going to talk later, Edgar from Sightlines Provisions, the whole Sims crowd back there, the Yeti guys, I don't see them here. You have Old Main Outfitters with Pat, and you have mixed in here all of our guides, and we can pick up the bat phone and say, can you please help us get the message out about this? And they're like, yes. And then Cody can work something up. They can share it, and we go from a potential of 50,000 to a potential of 8 million people seeing it. So it's a lot of leveraging relationships that are based on trust that we've built over time that are just the core of what he does.
And he just touched on the brand side because, Peter and all the tackle shop owners,
Farmy too.
Shop.
Everyone should follow Farmy. Skunked again.
So
Farmington River.
retail shops aren't a place without the manufacturers, right? So unless you're a manufacturer who does direct to consumer online or you own your own retail footprint, Jenks's shop is full of a million different brands, right? And so also those brands play a very important role. So when you talk about expanding the conservation effort at retail, it's also those brands, their placement, their ability to choose where they want to invest, because they're always balancing what events they can do with different tackle shops and whatever that might be. And so the brand's role in that conversation as well as, I'm going to use Edgar, but if Edgar goes into a business and says like, hey, this is what I really care about, this is what's going on with whatever, you sell 10,000 of my bands a year, those relationships have some influence on I guess the balance of that priority of conservation at retail.
And I think they also are key in, they just cast a broad net. And they're touching all those people that we have a hard time getting to, like I care about this, but I don't know how to participate. And then they'll see something on Sims and they'll be like, hey, that's awesome. Like, let me find out more about these guys. So it really does take a village. Cody, let's go to false albacore.
Yeah.
So I want to say, Cody's going to do false albacore because he fishes with them for him in Florida where he's a guide. And it's a little bit of a different fishery, but it's a connected stock thanks to our awesome research with New England Aquarium. But I just, little dour with striped bass. People criticize me for that and not being a fun, happy guy. Sorry in advance, but I have fun, happy things to talk about false albacore and bonito. Your state, if you live in Massachusetts, you need to send them a thank you email when you walk out of here because we went from nothing, no limits, killing as many bonito and albies as you want, to a 5-fish aggregate limit with a minimum size of 16 inches, which is based on their sexual maturity, based on 4 or 5 years of hardcore science work from New England Aquarium, combined with our policy and communication work. And if you believe in what we're doing, y'all did it. Here it is. If you sent an email, and we are working with 4 other states right now that are going to looking to adopt the same regulations that Mass DMF was brave enough to come out and adopt. I'm going to let Cody take over, but there's actually a state commissioner in this room who was an enormous help in educating people on the commission at that vote last week. Chris, if you just want to raise your hand. Chris was an integral part in kind of shepherding that through Mass DMF. We work with pretty much every state agency from Maine to Texas. Mass DMF is in the top. They're very good people. They're very smart people. We respect the hell out of them. And just a huge thank you for putting those regulations in because that was the match that hit the powder keg. And now all the other states kind of want to do it. So at least in Massachusetts, our guides, tackle shops, lure manufacturers, clothing brands, they know that people are going to be going out and fishing for albies and bonito.
I was just saying, and Greg Swomo is here from SDMF, the staff lead, putting together all the data around albacore.
We just know him for great whites, but was a huge help with that. Thank you very much, Greg. And you're the guy who's got a bromance for you sitting right behind you. You got to eat lunch with Nick. Nick did research on great whites, and he was like, "Oh my God, you know Greg Scommel." It was just one of those funny things in our so Tell them all about albies.
So Tony's
Cody.
like the guy who says, "Hey, watch this movie." At the end, the main character dies. So he just hits you with all of the cool
Totally.
stuff, and now I'm supposed to go back and tell you about the Albie project. Yeah, science management stuff. No, and I think honestly, it's good to keep this brief. One of the cool things about this is these are, it's a gathering, dozens of people on a Friday. Obviously, some people are working, some people see the weather for this weekend and they're out fishing, trying to get advantage of it while they can. But all of these are digital. We take all the presentations and convert them into podcasts. They're available on YouTube. So last year, we had Ed speak about the Albie project. So if you really want to get in depth into the research, it's available online. So on social, YouTube, podcast as well. But I guess I'll just give it a super quick summary. But over the last few years, we've done tagging research with the New England Aquarium to try to understand what's going on with false albacore. Normally, when we talk about this project somewhere else, I have to explain why all of us, and I'm going to say us because I grew up here, all of us crazy New England idiots care about albies. Right now, I live in Florida where they're bonita, excuse me. So they've been rebranded and have a different role in the fishing community there. But you guys know the craze. You guys know and chase them and deal with all the weather and deal with all the picky fish. I mean, where I fish them, you can throw I've caught them on massive hollow flies on 60-pound bite. Up here, you guys throw 12, and you're like, oh, there's on the clear sparkle epoxy, right? So very different experience and cult following for these fish up here. But to be able to tag them and show a connected coast has been massively critical, not only in the management, but also just in the perspective and understanding of this fishery. And from the brand side, showing connectivity between the coast from the community side, right? So someone who lives in Florida should care about these, as much as someone who lives in Massachusetts, because newsflash, we're fishing the same fish. So our tagging study, and you can get all the badass graphs and all the exact numbers on the tags from Ed's talk, and we'll make sure that people have the resources. We can send out a follow-up email after. But we documented a direct connection between the fish. We had fish that were tagged off the Cape and Islands up here that are basically, theoretically, swimming in a straight line in 2-ish weeks to Florida. And we have them all throughout the summer. They behave in a very different way than they do. And then I think the quickest one, maybe Ed could correct me, I think it was 11 days to cover the entire coast, which is insane. We had a fish.
Oh, wait, Ed's got the stats.
18 and a half days from Massachusetts down to Florida.
18 and a half days.
So 1,400 miles, right?
So if you drove on 95 north, that's how long it would take? 95 south.
Florida through Florida Keys and all the way up to the Gulf of Mexico too.
Yep.
But that's incredible, 2.5 weeks essentially.
And these fish are essentially swimming a lap because we had some of the fish that were tagged up here, and the life cycle on a tag on those first tags was about a year, if I remember correctly.
Year and 4 months.
Sure. So you got a little bit of gap there. We tagged them up here. They swam down to any of the given areas we just referenced, North Carolina, Florida, the Keys. And then we documented some of those fish coming back the next year. So it's a giant lap that they're swimming. And so all that we've documented about this fishery, and you're starting to see now going from, they're a bait fish in Florida, right? They're a nuisance. I was out there for blackfin. I was out there for mahi. Oh, it's another bonita. I can't believe it, right? This is some of the conversations happening in Florida. Now the Florida guys are starting to show huge concern because just south of me in Jupiter, there are 10 to 12 commercial boats on any given day that are hook and line live chumming these things and killing as many as possible because there are 0 regulations in Florida right now. And all my Jupiter guys and Stewart and all the way through West Palm, the guides and some of the rec anglers as well, but the guides really rely on these fish to get through the summer. I see some faces in here who have fished with some guide in that area for them during the summer. It's a very reliable fish. When the tarpon have passed through, the jacks have passed through, they're massive. I mean, we catch 20-pound albies pretty consistently throughout that entire area, and they're not as reliable anymore. I had times personally, this is anecdotal just for one individual, where I went out to some of the places that they live during the summer and they live chum. You take a well of pilchards and you throw some behind the boat and the albies come up and you can do whatever you want and have a field day. And I'm just throwing them up and nothing's coming up. And I know that's just one singular spot, but more and more people are having from Mr. Reliable for us, for our area, they're starting to kind of become troublesome to deal with. And the New England albie anglers are they're troublesome all the time. But, start to see now that Florida, it's becoming a concern with how the fishery is. It's all connected like we've talked about. So there's a growing cohort of concern and also collaboration and community and people, we have guides coming up to us in Florida who are like, I just wish we had the science, I see what you guys are doing up there. And it's like, well, hold on, you need to take a deep breath because this is all the same fishery. And so I'm not gonna go too much deeper in this just because of time, but we had, Tony just talked on Massachusetts. We also have North Carolina taking a management action and a few others in the works right now. And the bow that I want to put on the Albi project is a model for precautionary management. So I'll be Tony's positivity translator for the rest of the day. He talked about how stripers are in the shitter, right? But how we get there is you look at stripers and their management actions to try to correct whatever the heck just happened. You're operating in response to how things are going. Management actions like this are, hey, these things are awesome. And we're not saying there's chaos right now and that there needs to be all these restrictions, different rules, but like maybe we should put stuff in place just so like never gets bad. It seems like a rather benign concept, and this we deal with is not so benign for some other people, but in reality, I think the path forward to sustainable fisheries is like, why don't we just make sure they don't get bad, as opposed to running them to the bottom, then taking all these draconian actions to try to get back to moderate or a good share of what historically was. Like, what if we just keep things good? So this is largely positive. Why don't we?
Oh God.
Why don't we swap back? I guess this is like a positive negative thing here, but
so
we'll touch on redfish real quick, and the next one we're going to talk about right after this is kind of going to be the duplication of the Albi project.
So I just want to say one thing real quick, and we're going to go through this fast so we can get the next speaker up here. What Cody said about Albis makes a lot of sense now, because there's a lot going on in the federal government that's creating uncertainty. And for a group like ours that everything that we do pivots off of science, we have deep concerns for what that's going to look like next year and the year after that. We have nothing but respect for NOAA. I could really just name one bad decision that they've made in the last couple of years. There's no point in dwelling on that. But that was, whatever it is, what it is. But there are people that we rely on every day to base our policy decisions. We are working on Capitol Hill, with the appropriations process to make sure that this agency is not gutted. We're doing the best that we can in the trenches where we can pull a lever and we can have an impact. But by and large, besides all the people that I mentioned before, our guides, our tackle shops, our brands, the reality is that NOAA is a huge partner of ours. What they do is difficult, and I bring this up because these Albi regulations are kind of set it and forget it. And it's an attractive thing for a state agency to not have to do a fisheries management plan, for a state agency to not have to do a stock assessment. TNC developed a stock assessment process, that I'm not going to get into, but it's kind of like it's a little bit of a toned down, not as capital intensive of a stock assessment process. But we're going to have to start thinking outside of the box, I think, in the next couple of years. There is an unfortunate reality that we may not be able to rely on the same level of science that we're getting from the federal agency, and something like these Albi regulations, in the absence of enough science to do a full stock assessment, it's pretty attractive for a state agency to set regulations, set it, forget it, revisit it in 4 or 5 years, see if it's working out for everyone, and it is precautionary management. So let me talk about redfish for a second. So let's start out with something positive. Our team in Louisiana got the first regulation changes on redfish since 1988. I'll hang my hat on that.
And if you want to deep dive into that, we had Bailey Short, one of the guides from Louisiana, up here at last year's symposium as well. So that's another one.
Bayou Fabio.
He's
Just
got
look for the guy for like strawberry
locks.
blonde hair down to here, and looks like Tarzan. You can find him on our YouTube channel. He's not. You can't miss it. You're like, who is that? So you can't kill a big redfish in Louisiana anymore. Louisiana was one of the few states that you could do that. These fish are ancient. If you've ever eaten a big redfish, I'd liken it to fried styrofoam. There's really no value in it, and you know, people criticize Louisiana a lot for their lack of conservation ethic, and I would debate anyone on that. LDWF is actually a really good state agency, and they just needed a group like us to galvanize the conservation community and give them a voice. A couple of months ago, there was a state bill introduced by my good friend Joe Orgeron from Port Fourchon, and he wanted to sell $25 tags to start killing big redfish again to fund a hatchery. And he called me, and I warned him against it. And I said, I will put you on a frickin' billboard between Metairie and Kenner, and I will ruin your life if you put this bill forward. And they had the hearing for the bill, to which he withdrew it. So our influence in Louisiana is broadening. It's something to be really proud of, and we've kind of given a voice to conservation. In the South Atlantic and the Mid-Atlantic, so the redfish population in the Atlantic is divided into two stocks, the northern and the southern stock. There are concerns over the northern stock. They're not overfished. Overfishing is not occurring, but we have issues. In the South Atlantic, there are major issues. They're looking at about a 27% reduction. The spawning potential ratio and the escapement rates are both kind of out of whack. Spawning potential ratio is how many females are out there, how many eggs do they produce, you know, what is the spawning potential? They're asynchronous broadcast spawners, so they'll spawn multiple times and aggregations of up to 3,000 fish, a little bit offshore, kind of the opposite of stripers. And from Florida to South Carolina, they're looking at about a 27% reduction. So if you're at one fish and you need a 27% reduction, the writing's on the wall. So an addendum is going to be initiated at the next ASMFC meeting coming up in August, and which is the exact same time that Addendum 3 for Amendment 7 will be coming out for striped bass. So hooray. We're going to take a little bit of time off for this and breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth, and then we'll be running multiple advocacy campaigns at the same time for multiple species that are incredibly important to our fishermen from Florida to Maine. Hooray for us. But you know, that said, these fish are incredibly similar to stripers. You know, the smaller fish are in the estuaries, the bigger fish are off a little bit. They are pursued till the end of days by everyone from a fly rod to a bait fisherman and everyone in between. We're trying to figure out ways to how to take care of the bigger fish better as recreational anglers. And there are, unfortunately, there's some pretty robust stocking programs for these fish, and they don't do any good. And I will explain that for 1 second, and we will go on to the next slide. South Carolina has Bears Bluffs, which is a federal stocking facility. They stock millions of juvenile redfish in South Carolina every year, and they need a 27% reduction in harvest, and they're looking at a probable redfish moratorium. They have done plenty of DNA studies on the adult fish. South Carolina DNR is a very good state agency as well. They have a robust genetics lab. Less than 2% of the adult population has the genetics of the redfish that come from hatcheries. It just doesn't work, okay? It's a Band-Aid, and I don't want to see our saltwater fisheries turned into a put-and-take trout stream. They are little Forrest Gump redfish. They feed dolphins, they feed small sharks, and it never works out in the favor of the fisherman or the resource. And a hatchery that produces millions and millions of fish a year is basically just saying, I give up. I give up on the habitat issues, the water issues, the overharvest, and we're just gonna have this little pretend fishery for you to make you feel good inside, but there's really not a lot of future in it. So you look at the salmon and steelhead in California, and we don't want that to be our future. So we will oppose all of those vehemently moving forward for redfish. On the upside, they're really resilient fish. If you fish for stripers and you don't fish for redfish very much, stripers are essentially made from angel wings. These are made from coconuts. It's an awesome fish. They're pushing up into the Maryland portion of the bay. We are seeing them with regularity, all sizes. It's exciting for us to have something to fish for, and I strongly suggest reaching out to our guides, from Maryland to Texas, because it is an awesome, exciting fish. And if you suck, you can't really do the permit or tarpon. Redfish will really boost your ego. They're kind of dumb, and they kind of behave like you want a fish to behave. So call our guides, knock the rust off, make yourself feel good about sight fishing, and go catch a redfish with our people. All right, this is the exciting stuff. I'm not going to ruin it for Cody because it's his fishery, but this is the Albie project that we're just kicking off.
All right,
for him.
That was the thesis, the tagline there.
See, you just got to
dies
complain.
names. All right, so Jack Crevalle, when you look at why we started the Albie project, and again, kind of reiterating that you guys understand the drive and the value behind Albies, it's going to be duplicated here, and you'll see the similarities, but just to lay kind of context or groundwork is these projects are not just after we continue on with the Jack project, and I'm going to explain here in a second. It's not like what's the next random thing that we can create. There's no ladyfish project coming after or any other ones. In reality, it's trying to look at something that is just overlooked. Tony touched on something that it sucks to kind of boil down, that a resource that people care about, but sometimes it's just resources, right? Staffing, whether it's state, federal, the finances to be able to do the science, to better understand something, to drive. A lot of times there's pushback on any sort of management actions, and kind of rightfully so to a certain extent, about hey, how can we act on something and really make sound decisions when we don't have a lot to base those decisions on. So you take the role that albies play and kind of how they fit around striped bass and bluefish, or in different states, how they fit around the other seasons, the other fish to target. And they play a really key role, and especially on a year maybe when stripers are down, but there's a good albie run, that can have a significant impact on effort, opportunity, on driving business for manufacturers, for retailers, and that role that they play in the fishery. And Jack Crevalle have a very similar role, essentially from South Carolina down to Florida and all the way out to Texas. Florida specifically, I'll speak for, from my perspective and where I live now, but, a wealth of riches, right? I can fish, some of the people in here have fished with me, you can target 7 key species that you'd be excited to get one. You can target them in a 6-hour trip sometimes. There's so much diversity in Florida that when something is not good, if stripers and bluefish stink up here, your options become significantly shorter. In Florida, if the snook fishing was really bad for a year, well, maybe I'll chase medfish, maybe I'll chase sea trout, maybe I'll get into jacks, albies, sailfish, mahi, permit, everything, right? So you have this abundance of target opportunities, but as all of those go up and down and all the trends that all those key fisheries have, it's really important for rec anglers who just want opportunity. And that's not just someone who's got $10,000 badass fly setups and the cool truck and the boat and all these things. Opportunity also comes down to a father and son who just want to catch their first fish. They just want to see their son giggle as something pulls the drag for the first time. And Jack Crevalle cover all those bases. So if it's someone that wants to catch a 45-pound fish on a topwater popper, or from the surf, or on a fly from a boat, or if it's someone that just wants the drag to sing when other things are maybe above their skill level, or for a guide on today, man, I've checked all my tarpon spots, I've checked all my whatever, but hey, at least I can know I can go get some jack bites and my client will be happy to catch some fish. They play a really unique role in the angling community. And very similar to albies, we know very, very little about them. There's been a singular study, I believe it was almost 10 years ago now.
It was 2009.
Yeah, so it's been a while, but Florida International, FIU, worked with the Lower Keys Guides Association, because the Keys is an iconic fishing location, as many of you know or visited and experienced. What are the Keys known for? Assuming I'm talking, I guess, inshore, but right, it's tarpon, bonefish, and permit. That's the slam, that's the big key, that's the draw that everyone is traveling for. So you have these guides who take a lot of pride. They soup up their 18-foot skiffs to go 175 miles an hour. They're getting in fights over one, that's my sand pile for tarpon, right? It is very intense around those 3 species. And you have a group of guides going, we're not seeing jacks anymore. They were when things slow down in the winter, the migrations aren't going on, that was one of our old reliables to make sure that people could still set a hook. And we're seeing a significant decrease. So FIU works with the Lower Keys Guides Association. They put out a small subset of tags. And I should have had a map of the coast on here to better explain it, but I'm about halfway up on the east coast of Florida. So they deployed some tags in the Keys at the south end. I don't know, Ben, can I go full teacher on us right here? So that I'm nervous to draw the Gulf in Florida because it might not work right. But so this is the Gulf, okay? And they deployed tags down here in the Florida Keys. And what they found were the tags that they deployed, some of the fish went up to Louisiana, some of them went all the way to Texas, but they came right up to the east coast to the Port St. Lucie Inlet, right here in Port St. Lucie, Stewart area, and not a single tag went north of there. And so you have these areas concerned about where their jacks are going. We're hearing reports on the west coast, yeah, the jacks just don't show up what they used to. The bites in Louisiana and Texas are very unique. They don't have, maybe depending on the area, as many small fish. They see a lot of these big fish. From South Carolina to Florida, there's a season that some of you might be aware of where there's hordes of, thousands of fish from 20 to 50 pounds that school up in these massive schools, and they come down the beach and they're on the surface and they're not feeding. They're doing these aggregate, these pre-spawn, and I'm making a little bit of an inference here because these are the stuff we're trying to document. But how can you not see a single tag go north of here, and from here to up to here, you have this massive fishery of all these incredible massive fish. And we get in a pattern on the East Coast where we see them, they come down, you're fishing them, like we might run a trip where you see maybe 5,000 fish in an individual trip in 6 hours of fishing for them. It's wide open and everything you want to experience as an angler. And as we get near these major moons throughout the spring and the summer, you might run a trip on Thursday and see 5,000 fish, and on Friday you see 20. And then I get texted the next day from a free diver in 90 feet, and he's in the middle of a tornado of thousands of jacks on reefs out here in wrecks. And so there's a really unique thing going on with jacks that we do not understand the full picture, and we have decided to embark on the Jack Project. And so what we are going to do it's a 5-year project working with FIU, Mississippi State, MSU, and the Lower Keys Guides Association wants to continue to be involved. So they were able to fundraise to contribute 20 tags. ASGA is also going to put out another 120 tags in every key state, from South Carolina wrapping all the way around to Texas, to try to figure out what is going on with this fishery, and obviously with the goal of trying to also make sure that we can establish some sort of precautionary management. This is another fishery that is very reliable, drives a lot more business than people recognize, and has zero regulation from every major state. So again, not something where it's like the world is ending. There are some concerns in certain areas that we talked about, but how do we comprehend that there could be so many here and none in these areas if they're not swimming through? It's not like they were here and they swam up here and now they're not there. These are the questions we have to try to answer. And so we're going to be doing tagging, 120 tags. There's going to be DNA research included within it. And when FIU worked with the Lower Keys Guides Association, they took it to FWC, which is its own animal for management, and they said, hey, we'd like to see some management for jacks. We'd like, here's, it's not a super restrictive goal, but here's the goal. We'd like to establish this so that way we make sure that these things never get in a bad place. And what they were told by FWC as the management body is, this is all well and good, but we think this is just some Keys guides. You Keys guys just care about things specific to you, and we don't think the rest of the state cares about this as much as you do. And when I hear that challenge, it's like, I'm about to show you how the rest of the country cares about these things. So we are going, I'm actually going to, I'll jump this way real quick. So when you tell us that all these people, we just don't feel the stakeholder engagement. We just don't feel that the stakeholders are there to care about these fish. We start to reach out to our guides who really give a damn, and you start to reach out to these brands who really give a damn, and all of a sudden things tie together. So one of the campaigns that we are grateful to have Edgar from Sightline Provisions on site here today to kind of, we just unveiled it really like 2-ish weeks ago at Lefty Craze Thai Fest, but the first 45 tags, technically 40 tags, people are going to be able to purchase a Sightlines. They can either get it made as a band or a keychain, but they'll get a number. And that number is going to be directly associated with one of the tags deployed. and working with FIU, who's been outstanding. Their student who's assigned over this next 5-year project, as they do their data updates, those updates are going to go to you. Steve, you bought tag number 12. Guess what? He swam up the coast and then he got harvested by someone and they called in the tag. Or, you know, hey, it didn't make it more than 2 days. It had a tail beat frequency in the tag that changed to a significant number. Sorry, we think your fish got sharked. Or maybe, hey, your fish was landed in Stewart, you released it. Do you know it's over in Texas living its best life now? It's got cowboy boots on, right? Like, you know, we're excited to be able to engage people to say, hey, we talked about resources and how they can be limited for science. If you want to help bridge that gap for scientists to continue to learn about the fish you care about, you get to be involved in it. And there's going to be all sorts of different prizes for fish that swim the longest, end up near different destinations. And so when you talk about engagement and people being involved with the process, we're really excited and thankful to have Edgar's partnership to kick this off. And so tags are going to be able to be tracked by people who are involved in the process. And another thing that we just, for sake of time, I won't take a deep dive into it, but we just did Lefty Cray's Thai Fest on the East Coast. We did it in Vero Beach. It was this massive all-day event with fly tires and all the legends of the sport. I think you can see all sorts of faces in here. Larry Dahlberg, who else?
That's
Chico
Larry.
Fernandez.
If y'all ever watched Hunt for Big Fish,
all
he aged
major
like I
folks.
did. That's him on the it's him on the bottom left.
Carter Andrews, Hillary Hutchison, who else? Paul Brune, Oliver
Fordyce.
White, Rob Fordyce, Andy
Mill.
Mill. I think I already said Carter, Eddie Nickens from Tail Magazine in there. But all these incredible people from around the country who have been involved with, you know, hundreds of thousands to millions of people learning, getting involved, engaged in the sport, all came together for this massive event to raise money for the Jack Project. And I'm going to leave the Jack Project off here with one video that Hunter from the Captain's Collective podcast, if any of y'all listen to that, did.
I think the Jack crevalle is one of the most underrated game fish that we have on all of our coasts.
Probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
One of the highest paced, most action-packed fish we have.
Jacks are such an underappreciated fish.
Never really understood why people give jacks a bad rap. Like, do you not want to mad frenzy? Do you not want to, like, lose your mind? Like, we deserve this.
Try the jack, like, you know, put that thing on your
By you, Fabio.
Jacks are the linebacker.
They're intense with dump truck, a popper, you know, at your pose.
You're right, get it.
The bulldogs, where the guy in the corner that at the last minute does want to fight you.
Paul
9
Puckett.
times out of 10, you're going to see them in a school, and they respond as a school.
And like anything that has no commercial value, we don't know enough about them or where they go or what they do. And so to invest that energy now before they are at perils, I think is mission critical.
Protect these fish, man, that's what matters here. How could you not love that?
So to put a bow on the Jack Project, we have so much to learn here, and you'll see more and more coming out with that over the next 5 years, which we're super excited about. But, you know, as a management body tells you, man, we're just not sure that people really care about this. And then you look at the profile of people that just participated in that, from South Carolina, Virginia was represented there, Texas, all sorts of different guides, biggest names, TV shows, brand owners, shop owners, like, oh, maybe everyone did care, or, you know, even if it's not their 1A fish, they really do love and appreciate this fish. And we just weren't having the conversation in a unified manner. So I guess that's my lead into the Jack Project. We're trying to keep everything concise here because we've got an awesome lineup.
Let me just kind of wrap everything up. So we'll get back to science, education, and advocacy. With how things are going at the federal government, with all the uncertainty, with issues on, you know, the most popular fish, like, we're here for y'all, you know, whether it's jacks or it's false albacore or it's bonito. We have the unique ability to bring everyone together and to raise money and to work with scientific institutions, aquariums, universities, whomever. So if there's something that you care about, something that means something to you, tell us. Like, reach out to us if y'all need help with something. Like, that is our role. That's who we are. We're not just going to go to a meeting and scream and yell and say that science is stupid. We're going to raise money to get better science and then give I really truly believe that a lot of the people that sit on these councils, commissions, state agencies, federal agencies, regional, whatever, they want conservation. And we need to provide the political will so that vision of theirs comes true. So, you know, look at us as like a proxy gladiator who can raise money. We'll get in there, take the slings and the barbs, raise the money, present the science, and it may take 4 or 5 years. None of this stuff is fast. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. But I see our association uniquely positioned in the context of what today is to be the leaders that can conserve these fish for future generations, that can add to the body of knowledge, and that can kind of give some kind of layer of protection for the scientists out there to be able to keep doing their work. So I think if anything, our role has become more important in fisheries. We will continue to fight for them. We will continue to add to our body of science. We will continue to add. Right now I have folks who want to do work on snook. You know, why are they catching snook in Alabama right now? I have researchers in Louisiana that are electroshocking 20-inch tarpon in zero salinity water way back in the bayous in the northwest corner of Lake Pontchartrain. They're catching bonefish in the Chandeleur Islands. What the hell? You know, there is a lot of stuff that we do not understand that is going on that we are uniquely positioned to help out with. So please, you know, come along with us. Thank you all for coming. We're going to start the next talk now, but our job is to hold the line and to actually advance the ball in this incredible time of uncertainty. And we're like too dumb to quit. So we're just blue collar grinders. And like I tell everyone on our team, you cannot beat something that doesn't quit. And that's who we are at our core. So that's it for ASGA. Let's bring the next speaker up.
Quick update on Run a Show. So